Good evening, everyone. For those of you who I've never met, my name is Sarah Clark Kaplan. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Critical Race, Gender, and Culture Studies here at American University, and the co-director of our new Race, Climate, and Agrarian Justice Lab at American University. Tonight's keynote address is the end of a long day's event entitled Beyond the Farm Bill, Strategizing Agrarian Politics for Racial and Climate Justice. And in the same way that today's workshop and strategy session was the first research action event of our new lab, tonight's keynote address is the first public event that we've hosted. I want you, for those of you who are new, I'd like you to understand the scope of what you're entering into. Today's convening and tonight's keynote is part of a longer arc of work that has existed for over 14 years to introduce questions of racial and climate justice to agricultural policy in general, and to the U.S. Farm Bill in particular. And I was told not to touch the screen, but I did touch the screen. I couldn't help it. The work that we're doing right now began with the 2023 Pointing the Farm Bill Toward Racial Justice Summit and has continued in this formation for the 3 years since, though its roots do lie not only in the work with American University, but in a multiple decade history of organizing, advocacy, and growth that have operated across the country, led by advocates, organizers, farmers, farm workers, and others working at the front lines and intersections of agrarian politics, racial equity, and climate justice. Today's event is part of our lab's long-term goal and purpose: to connect organizations, movements, and communities engaging in, did I touch it?
It's switched. It's okay. Keep going.
Engaging in intersectional and integrated work, and to help develop a shared analysis, to identify common goals and strategies, and to develop usable, actionable resources that support the work of those at the front lines of this movement for racial, climate, and agrarian justice. And while she is not with us here today, Dãnia Davy has been a critical part of that work, which is why we're so grateful to conclude today's events with her. Before we turn to Dãnia's keynote, there are a few key issues. First, I'd like to thank all of you who participated in today's workshop and those of you who have come both on Zoom and in person for tonight's keynote address. I want to acknowledge the hard work of the School of International Studies events team, the food service workers who have provided us with sustenance for tonight's reception and for the day as a whole, the staff of the staff of the new lab, which includes not only our incredible co-director and full-time staff person, partial staff time person, Justine Williams, but also our research assistant and events assistant, Tracy Watson, our undergraduate social media assistant, Jalen. Oh my God, Jalen, I'm so sorry. I just forgot your last name. Jalen, I am so sorry. Jalen's been in my class all semester. Jalen, it's been a long day. Jalen Baker, as well as our help today, our events coordinator, Nalani Love Harris, and our research assistants, Avery Gilliam and Laurel Levin. So, with thanks of all of that, I'd also like to make sure that we thank our funders, the Platform for Agricultural Transformation, Agriculture and Climate Transformation, as well as the Institute for Responsible Carbon Resource removal. And as well as the Anti-Racist Research and Policy Center for enabling us to use their staff today. And on that note, I'm actually going to give us a chance to turn it over to Justine Williams, who is going to, for those of you who are not there, share a little bit about today's activities and the broader work that we are doing as a collective.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and thank you everyone who joined us all day long and everyone who's online with us tonight. I'm going to tell you just a little bit about what we talked about today, and I know the rest of the room here will hold me accountable and tell me if I've missed anything that I should be sharing. But we opened up the morning today with a look back on the deep roots of today's movement. We stand on the shoulders of a lot of work, and so we turned to three amazing women from three legendary organizations: Stephanie Banks of the Federation of Southern Cooperatives Land Assistance Fund, Milly Trevino Salceda of the Alianza Nacional de Campesinas, and Lorette Picciano of Rural Coalition to help ground us in some of that history. And from there, the flow of the day took us through food, to work, to land retention and conservation, and to livelihoods on the land. We organized this not around the categories that federal policy necessarily wants us to think in, but the actual categories that matter to all of us, to have a fair and just food and agrarian system. So our first roundtable was Beyond Food Access, Nourishing Stewardship, Sovereignty, and Self-Determination. And we were joined by Carolina Gonzalez from the Heal Food Alliance, Jasmine Jackson, or as we all know her, Dr. Jazz, from the National Black Food and Justice Alliance, Shakira Tyler Saba from the Detroit Black Community Food Sovereignty Alliance, and Shanda Robinson Banks from Ujamaa Cooperative Farming Alliance. And they helped us look at where we are right now and why we need to think beyond SNAP, beyond the Farm Bill, beyond all these pieces of legislation we have, and fix them, and what can we do beyond that? How can we build self-determination from the ground up and in coalition between movements? From there, we had a panel with 5 amazing women from the Alianza Nacional de Campesinas. We were joined by, again, Milly, the executive director of Alianza, Amy Tamayo, the policy director, and 3 organizers, Marisol Salcedo, Erika Guevara, and Francisca Aparicio, who helped us understand what is the context right now in the face of oppressive immigration policy and the repeal of so much climate policy, pesticides, and what are organizers doing right now, and what can we build to in the long term. From there, we had a fireside chat style moderated conversation on strategies for deep resilience, land retention, market access, conservation, and funding, joined by Freddie Davis of the Rural Training and Research Center, Marcus Grignon of Rural Coalition, and Seneca Edward Heron, who helped us think through what can we do right now and in the future for keeping folks on the land, for getting better access to land. And then finally, in our last panel of the day, last but definitely not least, we had Sustaining Livelihoods, Updating Agricultural Parity for Racial Equity and Agrarian Justice, moderated by our own Garrett Grady Lovelace, and joined by Tiffany Belfield Elamine from, this is a completely wrong slide, I'm sorry, Tiffany, from the Kentucky Black Farmers Association, Mr. Ben Burkett from the Mississippi Association of Cooperatives, as well as Darnella Burkett Winston from the Mississippi Association of Cooperatives, and Edward Jerry Pinnock joining us from Zoom from Tuskegee University, and looking at how can we reimagine parity to actually support farmer livelihoods today. So if that sparks any of your curiosity, those that weren't, and so much more we talked about. So if that sparks your curiosity, we're going to be working together after this event to think through what comes next. So please stay tuned. We have an Instagram at Farm Bill Fairness. We have our website, farmbillfairness.org. Please sign up for our newsletter. And if you're interested in being part of what comes out of this, then let us know. And with that, I would like to hand it over to our co-director, Garrett Grady Lovelace, to introduce Dãnia.
Thank you so much. Great. Good evening, everyone. How's everyone doing? Good. And online. And Dãnia, are you there? Hopefully she's
I'm here.
Yay! Okay, this one's for you. So I'm Garrett Grady Lovelace. I'm loving seeing the familiar faces, excited to meet the faces I don't know yet, and share this space with you. We had the honor of working with Dãnia Davy in preparation for the 2023 Pointing the Farm Bill Toward Racial Justice Summit. We started in the summer of 2022 and had weekly meetings. And that sounds like a lot, but it was totally joy because it was with Dãnia. So our weekly working calls were filled with knowledge, camaraderie, and Dãnia's famous warmth, integrity, wisdom, and vision. She had been leading the Federation's policy advocacy monthly listening sessions with all of the members of all of the co-ops for years, from COVID on, and collected the content of what people needed, and that ended up culminating in our 3-day summit at Airlie and in this room and beyond. And so we brought hundreds of farmers in from the Federation and all of our allies, and then we went to the Senate and did a congressional briefing. We had so much optimism about the Farm Bill at the time. Looking back on our notes, it's like devastating to see what's happened since. But in the meantime, Dãnia, after that, was scooped up by Oxfam. Then she was scooped up by Vermont Law School to teach her expertise in heirs property. Everybody wanted to work with Dãnia. But then she went back home to Jamaica, where she's from, and actualized her dreams as the attorney, author, activist, founder of Land and Liberation LLC, a consultancy promoting liberatory relationships between humans, natural and financial resources, and land-based life. To help small-scale farmers, land stewards, and their communities support and navigate the challenges of the current political fascist climate, she created the safety net for the future of village farming. Now, in January of 2025, we were all in shock. It was the bleakest winter, and she launched WTF. But that actually stood for, from her, We're the Future, through which she's been distributing relentlessly informative, inspiring weekly newspapers for a year and a half, a robust educational website, extensive referrals to professional services to all kinds of people in dire straits. All their funding had been cut. They were being incarcerated by ICE. They didn't know how they were going to feed their families. And she's literally every day, every week, moving resources, moving knowledge, the kind of mentor for movements around the whole country and beyond. The focus was on supporting Black, Indigenous, immigrant, and small-scale farmers who were ravaged by the 2025 backlash, the racist backlash, and also the backlash against climate and ag. As authoritarianism took over the government, Dãnia's educational webinars boldly held space for our confusion, WTF, anger, grief at the lost resources, lost support, and the criminalization of the communities. With improbable joy, irrepressible love, and her layers of expertise in all things USDA and ag and law, Dãnia rapidly mobilized the Village Farmer Fund to help vulnerable people access all of life's necessities by supporting disaster relief, mutual aid, solidarity economy networks, legal assistance. Building upon the success of this amazing safety net, which saved so many people, she returned home to Jamaica to coordinate the Hurricane Melissa rapid response fundraising and brought all of that work and energy to her homeland of Jamaica. She's now recently launched the Rematriation Invitation to engage Indigenous elders in Jamaica and in the Afro-Caribbean diaspora in supporting Afro-Indigenous land harmony and food sovereignty. Where there's a need, she's there and she's on it. Dãnia enjoys reading and spending time in nature and communicating via memes with her amazing daughter, Amara, who was crux to our 2023 summit. So shout out to your daughter, Dãnia. Thank you for all you do and all you are. We welcome you.
Okay, so I just want to say that Garrett definitely amped up that bio. I'm so grateful. I want to, before I go into my remarks, I need to do this, and I want to invite everyone into a practice. And so I hope no one's driving, and I hope everyone is comfortably seated. But before I bring in my remarks, I want to invite everyone to join me in a few moments of mindful reflection, because that was a lot. So I want you to close your eyes and take a deep breath in. And as you exhale, I want you to look into your mind's eye, and I want you to find the face of a beloved ancestor. So this could be someone that you're related to or someone that has inspired you. And I just want you to, as best as you can, I'm not great at visualizing, but as best as you can, see the face of that beloved ancestor in your mind. And I want you to think about, what are some of the things that they wanted for the future? Did they face any hardships? Was there any loss that they experienced that changed the course of their life? I want you to kind of see the challenges they encountered in their journey, the difficulties they were able to overcome, the ones they weren't. And I want you to see them placing their vision for a world in which no one else would experience the hardships they endured into a handful of soil. And then they're handing that handful of soil to you. Then I want you to take another deep breath in. And as you exhale, I want you to look deep into your mind's eye and see the face of a beloved child in your life. If you don't have a child of your own, I want you to imagine the face of any child. And I want you to see the world that they're inheriting. The school shooter drills, the cancer-causing foods, the toxic environment created by data centers, and the open-faced hatred being performed on social media. Now, I want you to imagine that child in a future that you have helped to shape. I want you to see all the challenges and barriers that you're currently facing, and I want you to see yourself placing your vision for the new world into a seed and handing it to them. And only once you're ready, I want to invite you to open your eyes. So I never write speeches. Anyone who knows me knows I just kind of speak from the heart. But I really wanted to make sure that I wrote the remarks for this gathering today because I knew that I was going to be in a room in my heart with so many of my beloveds. And I did not realize how sad I was going to be to actually not be there in person. And I would see people walk past the camera, and I just felt like torture to see you walking by the camera. And I wasn't able to like call out to you, give you a hug, and grab you for a quick chat. And so I just kind of want to name that some of the sadness that was coming up for me was that as a naturalized citizen, I honestly don't feel safe making plans to travel to the United States right now. And so that made me really sad because I really, really wanted to be there with you all. And it also gave me kind of a fly on the wall view of everyone in the room. And so, of course, I have to give some shout outs. And I want to apologize in advance because I couldn't see everyone that was in the room. But of the folks that I saw, I definitely have to give a shout out to Ben Burkett, because without Ben, I would know nothing about anything. And then, of course, I have to thank my sister Darnella for sharing her dad with me and for the sisterhood that she has shown me over the years. I have to thank Sarah, Justine, and Garrett for using the lab to do this work and carrying forward the work that needs to be done. And also, I know that both on the Zoom room and in the physical room there with you, I have at least 3 former employers. So the Federation, Land Assistance Fund, Rural Coalition, and Land Loss Prevention Project. Without each of you, I would have never learned anything about the Farm Bill. I also want to give a shout out to Holly and Deshawn. I'm not sure that Deshawn's in the room, but I know I saw Holly briefly. I really want to shout you both out for facilitating the Transformational Farm Bill cohort and bringing amazing folks like Heal Food Alliance, National Black Food and Justice Alliance, and RAFI into this conversation with us. And I also want to thank a few groups that I'm not sure were in the room. I didn't actually see anyone from these groups, but I think in the past, in the recent years of my career in particular, and in the past few weeks specifically, I've seen them role modeling Farm Bill advocacy despite the cuts to their funding, all the job terminations they had to navigate, and just the DC hellscape. And so I want to give a shout out to the National Sustainable Ag Coalition, National Young Farmers Coalition, and the National Family Farm Coalition. I think it's really important that they've continued to send out those action alerts, send emails, and do the social media campaigning that we need to get this trash farm bill voted down right now. And I just have to say hey to Dr. Jazz, Sakina, Tiffany, Zach, Summer, Freddie, Tandel, and literally like everyone that's here. I just really hope that we'll be able to be in the same physical space again soon. So I wrote a specific set of remarks over the weekend, but I was blessed to be able to participate virtually throughout the course of the day. And so I felt really compelled to make some changes. So both for the interpreters and just for everyone that has had to kind of spend their day in the room and hear these various themes and feel the various feelings of overwhelm that I felt, of looking back at where we were when we were together for the summit. But I just want to give thanks for the divine inspiration that arrived after being able to participate in the sessions with you all day. So the phrase of the title for my keynote is actually an invitation to imagine what is possible beyond the Farm Bill. And some of you know, I don't know if this is top secret or like, I think some of you may have figured out, I'm actually a time traveler. And as Garrett was reading all of the things, I was like, yeah, that there's probably folks who figured that out by now. And so in the spirit of my time travels, I'm going to begin at the end of the title and work my way backwards. So with liberation and justice for all, the courage it takes to get Reconstruction right. As an immigrant to the United States in the 1980s, one observation I made early in my childhood was that the fastest path to assimilation was to adopt an anti-Black stance. It was curious to me that proving yourself better than Native Americans didn't automatically give an immigrant a pathway to assimilation, but taking on an anti-Black stance did. In the immigrant community I grew up in, anti-Black posturing sounded something like, Black Americans have so many opportunities here that they take for granted because they blame racism for everything. And as you can imagine, immigrants didn't come up with this idea on their own. It's important to understand that we are given overt and subtle cues that distancing yourself from Black Americans improve your chances for social mobility. And I think this is a sentiment that is pervasive in other communities as well. When I attended predominantly white schools, I was told things like, you're not like those other Black people, you're smart because your mom's Chinese. So if you're working under the assumption that your country is inherently fair, you have to figure out how to understand the position Black Americans hold in American society. First of all, race plays a different role in many of the British colonized nations in comparison to the role that it plays in the United States. In the United States, when people are making assumptions about race, by and large, they're unconsciously making assumptions about class. Because Black Americans across many groups are presumed to be locked in a position of lower wealth and lower income. And so that's why I started at Reconstruction, because I think that almost everyone can agree that the preceding era, during which enslaved Africans were human trafficked and denied human rights for generations, those folks couldn't be blamed for failing to catch up to white Americans. But it was during the Reconstruction era that Black Americans started doing everything within their power to gain access to American citizenship. I also start with Reconstruction because most people don't learn anything about it in school. So unless you're a nerd like me, you probably aren't diving into the parts of history that aren't covered in high school for fun. So what does Reconstruction cover? Reconstruction covers from 1865 to 1920, or in United Statesian terms, the period after the Civil War through the end of World War I. As many of us in this room know, this is the era during which Black American farmers were accumulating as much land as possible and reached the peak of Black land ownership in the United States. Part of the push to acquire land was a part of the broader effort among Black Americans to secure their citizenship rights. Black Americans effectively envisioned virtually every political, cultural, and economic accomplishment they needed to achieve to gain full acceptance into the American citizenship project. Madam C.J. Walker became a millionaire. Booker T. Washington founded Tuskegee University. George Washington Carver graduated from Iowa State University and began innovating and inventing agricultural practices and products. And the successful Black towns of Nicodemus, Kansas, Eatonville, Florida, and Mound Bayou, Mississippi, among others, were established. As I listen to the intergenerational discussions about liberation and sovereignty, I go back to the Reconstruction era because I often find evidence that Black Americans already tried with varying degrees of success almost anything we would dream up. Unfortunately, much of the progress Black Americans achieved during Reconstruction is overshadowed by the white supremacist pathologies that emerged. Instead of achieving acceptance or even tolerance by white Americans for overcoming enslavement with no support from any government, everywhere they went, they were met with lynching, imprisonment, massacres, and the institutionalization of anti-Black violence by Jim Crow apartheid laws. The Zinn Education Project has traced over 30 massacres of Black communities during the Reconstruction era. Equal Justice Initiative has meticulously documented 4,400 instances of lynching from the Reconstruction era through World War II. Far from isolated incidents, these anti-Black racist efforts became institutionalized through Jim Crow apartheid laws and incentivized incarceration to maintain the institution of slavery that continues to this day. I heard one of my sisters this morning talk about ethnic cleansing in the United States. And I think that if we understood Reconstruction, we would know that it was during this era that policing Black Americans became the model for genocidal violence during the Holocaust, the apartheid of South Africa against Palestinians in Gaza, and again, against immigrants in the United States all over again. So if it sounds like I'm being morbid, I want you to remember that no matter how much you hear that we're living through times that are unprecedented, we are literally living through very precedented times. And I think that's why it seems like I'm a time traveler, because I'm just a nerd obsessed with history. And one thing that really gives me hope when I study Reconstruction era politics is that against that background of racial terror, 25 Black people were elected to Congress and over 1,500 were elected to state legislatures. Can you even imagine the courage it took to run for office during that time? Can you imagine proposing legislation to a room full of white supremacists who did everything they could to deny you your seat in the room? Can you imagine knowing that you're putting yourself, your family, and your community directly in harm's way and doing it anyway to create a better future for generations to follow? If we, as a nation, had listened to the wisdom of Black Americans, we would be a lot less overwhelmed and a lot more prepared for the moment that we're in. After studying the long-term impacts of the unfinished work of Reconstruction, when I was in law school, I wrote a paper advocating for a new United States Constitution. At that time, such a statement was almost considered treasonous. Americans of all races have clung to the Constitution as evidence of a superior brand of democracy that no other government in the world has been able to produce. Today, we're seeing the fallacies of that belief, and yet most Americans remain beholden to the dream that after the midterms and after this president, everything will go back to normal. But what was normal, friends? Has normal ever included restoration of stolen Indigenous and Black land and labor? Has normal ever included government investments in the region of the country in which 80% of Black Americans live? Has normal ever meant a farm bill that truly embraced equity for future generations? Since the Constitution was ratified in 1788, it has only been amended 33 times. Of those amendments, 26 have been ratified. The first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights, occurred in 1791. 3 of those amendments were passed during Reconstruction. Now, for those of you who are lucky enough to never have had to go to law school, ratifying a constitutional amendment is the hardest legislative task in the Constitution. First of all, 2/3 of the representatives in both houses of Congress must vote in favor of the amendment. Then 3/4 of the states must vote in favor of the amendment. So today, that would mean 290 representatives and 67 senators would need to affirm the amendment. Then 38 of the 50 states would have to affirm that amendment for it to be passed. And what were the 3 Reconstruction amendments? The 13th Amendment abolished slavery under certain conditions. The 14th Amendment outlined citizenship and equal protection rights, and the 15th Amendment allowed men of any race to vote. So what's curious about these amendments is that they've pretty much, in particular, the 14th Amendment, been stretched as far as possible to grant many of what we consider to be our civil rights today. As a result, much of our litigation and legislative advocacy has been predicated on assumptions that we all share about the 14th Amendment in equal protection. Each of these amendments gives Congress the power to enforce, by appropriate legislation, the provisions of the amendment. And therein lies the unfinished business of Reconstruction. Because since 1870, Congress has refused to pass appropriate legislation to institutionalize the total abolition of slavery, equal protections of the laws, or permanent voting protection. Instead, we have been forced to litigate based on increasingly particularized facts, the kind of protections a post-colonial nation-state needs to achieve fundamental citizenship rights and equality. This administration is taking full advantage of this weakness in our movement's legislative toolkit, forcing us to expend time, energy, and financial resources on rights we assumed were settled, but were actually never truly protected by law. From our modern vantage point, I wonder if the unfinished work from Reconstruction is our work. And I wonder if their courage gives us the opportunity to be courageous. And what I'm going to invite you to do will take more courage than we have ever seen, because it includes the analysis that is the single biggest threat to capitalism. But before I ask you to be brave, I want you to ask yourself a few questions. Do we need citizenship to achieve liberation? Do we need citizenship to achieve justice? Has citizenship protected anyone from the ICE attacks? Has citizenship protected communities of color from disparate political, health, or economic outcomes? Did citizenship protect Black, Indigenous, Latin, or women farmers from discrimination by their government? Did citizenship protect our organizations or communities that we serve from the federal government violating contract law and terminating our grant programs? From a federal policy perspective, I think the closest we've come to advancing the work left unfinished by Reconstruction was Justice 40, which must be attributed in large part to the Black women in the environmental justice movement over the past 40 years. The Justice 40 federal policy departed from the civil rights playbook and meticulously documented wholesale divestment of the federal government from thousands of frontline communities across the United States, predominantly in the South. Based on irrefutable data, the Justice 40 advocates mapped areas of the United States that have become sacrifice zones for the rest of us to enjoy the American Delulu. Justice 40's revolution was a departure from categoric entitlements to a constitutionally sound strategy, demanding the commitment of 40% of federal spending in communities that have been on the front lines, historically excluded, and thereby disadvantaged. By and large, our movement was not a part of the movement to advance Justice 40. One interpretation I have is that our movement was committed to the strategy employed by the civil rights movement. Much of our Farm Bill advocacy strategy was based on the civil rights litigation strategy instead of a legislative strategy. We internalized some of the legislative barriers as permanent and rested on the laurels of the Pigford race-based discrimination settlement and accepted evolving definitions of the socially disadvantaged farmer or ranchers as a narrowly tailored solution to a government-created harm. Some of you already know that is the constitutional scrutiny that a government program must withstand to fit into the 14th Amendment protections. In contrast, Justice 40 dreamed and realized something our movement thought was impossible. Instead of neoliberal individual entitlements, Justice 40 placed the target for change on the realities of persistent class inequities. You cannot look at an individual and know what class they are from, but you can look at a community and know what socioeconomic status is overrepresented there. The community level wellness assessment made this framework constitutionally resilient. Part of our movement's rationale was that race was a well-documented set of information by the Ag Census and National Agricultural Statistics Service data, but class really wasn't. Further, we were able to see race-based discrimination against Black farmers play out at the local level. But our focus on this metric meant we were not really paying attention to the community-wide divestments small rural farming communities faced in the allocation of federal funding. Spreading our successes so thin, remaining in our silo, and trusting the trickle-down justice from the civil rights litigation strategy destabilized the ground we made in the past 40 years. We had opportunities to be brave, but we chose the safer path. We could spend the next few years wringing our hands and paralyzed by regret, but we have to remember what we were up against when we took the path we took. To get Reconstruction right, our movement is going to need courage that I don't know that we've actually practiced for at least a generation. Because why have we taken the safer route? After Reconstruction, lynchings and land theft made most people of the land encourage their children to take the safe path of assimilation. And I do not mean integration, I mean assimilation into the white supremacist patriarchal capitalism that promises, but never guarantees, individual safety if you perform assimilation well enough. Even though the Great Recession, COVID, and this war of United States aggression against the world have come to teach us otherwise, we latch on to the American dream and believe that if we bide our time until midterms, the nightmare we're living in will go away. But I'm here to remind you, friends, that captured courts, overturned settled precedents, isolation from allies, and the wealth hoarding we have witnessed in the past year will not only affect our lives, but our legacy as a movement. So, as a movement, we know what happened to the Black leaders that tried to achieve American citizenship. And like the gentle parenting trends among millennials, we overcorrected. We've retreated so far into the normalization of individual safety that we've forgotten that the greatest legacies we inherited came from our pre-colonial ancestors. So, one quick correction I want to make is that WTF really does mean what the fuck. Like, I just want to clarify that that is really what it meant when I started making those resources. But now it truly has come to mean we're the future, because we can actually do something to move beyond the Farm Bill and liberate and achieve liberation and justice for all. And I'm going to try to be quick because this is a lot longer than I planned for it to be. So first of all, we have to decolonize our metric of success. We need to develop a movement-wide practice of decolonial trauma-informed communication and accountability. We need to remember that the Farm Bill is large because of the nutrition programs, and this points to the need for income guarantees. And finally, we need to become seeds. And I'll try to get through those rather quickly so that there's time for you all to enjoy communion together. So decolonizing our metric of success. So this is where things get really exciting. And I, as a nerd, could not be more excited for this opportunity that we have. We inherited metrics of success that are based on white supremacist capitalism. And the good news is that over the past 40 years, nothing that ag economists promised would happen in terms of the quality of farmers' income, the quality of our food, or the quality of our food system infrastructure has materialized. In fact, the hoarding of capital and wealth have positioned most of us on the verge of collapse. No matter what version of fiscal conservatism we were told would trickle down to the rest of us, not one of us, but all of us are feeling it. And everyone around the world is realigning themselves with new allies, which positions the petrodollar on a very dangerous path within the global economy. Decolonizing our metric of success means we have to create parallel systems of care, circular economies, and local public budget processes that improve public spending, especially investments making the lives of farmers, farm workers, and frontline workers more affordable. Developing a movement-wide practice of decolonial trauma-informed communication and accountability. This is a big one. This is a big one because we have never seen it role modeled at all. And it's going to literally take all of us to get it right. You see, white supremacist capitalism is transactional. It determines value based on what someone can do for you. But the kind of people who want to steward the land, grow food, or buy food from farmers with ethical practices are not the typical capitalists. We have to stop acting like there's any job, role, or labor that is inferior. And this begins with letting go of the colonial lie that what you produce determines your value. Each of you is valuable because you exist. By learning to actually see each other as someone worthy of dignity and someone worthy of your care, as not disposable, then we will remember that every human can also be held accountable. Maybe not by the laws of the land, but by willing participants of our movement and the communities that we influence. Remembering that the Farm Bill is large because of the nutrition programs, which points to the need for guaranteed income. I admire every co-op and every disadvantaged farmer who has been able to innovate access to capital. But I think the time has come for our movement to align with other movements demanding income guarantees. Specifically, I think our movement should be demanding income guarantees for farmers, farm workers, and frontline workers. And I think there are also ways to mutually support income guarantees for all essential workers. The government has created entire programs to bring workers from other nations, pay them better wages than people living in the United States. So the government can figure out how to give guaranteed incomes to our frontline workers and farmers. We need those guaranteed incomes now. And we don't even need an income or means test because farmers can either choose the guaranteed income or their subsidies, which will make this program much less of a political target for the lobbying class. And finally, we need to become seeds. So what is a seed, right? So I'm no scientist, but I know that a seed is comprised of 3 parts. There's the like baby plant, there's the food it needs to grow, and then there is the shell, the cover. I know there are far more distinguished ways of describing the parts of a seed, but to me, a seed is a miracle. And I think it's a miracle that something looks nothing at all like what it's going to grow up to be. It can find itself in toxic soil or other inhabitable conditions, but in its little seedless, it knows that it is supposed to become something, and it never loses sight of that vision. So I want to invite us all one more time into some reflection. As you close your eyes and inhale, and then exhale, I want you to see everyone in the room and in the Zoom room holding the soil of their ancestors in one hand and the seeds of our descendants in the other. And I want us to remember to never lose sight of the power of that vision. You can open your eyes.
That was amazing, Dãnia. Thank you. I wish you could see us. We're giving you so much love. Thank you. Thank you.